Two corrections officers walked Edmund Croft across the staff parking lot at Stonebrook Remand Centre in the November rain. Not roughly. Not in front of the cameras mounted above the facility entrance, but with a particular firmness that told you they weren't worried about what the cameras would show. Travis Henley had his hand on Edmund's elbow, the way you'd hold a shopping cart you were steering around a curb. Brent Colhoun walked 3 steps ahead and held the administrative wing door open with his foot, not looking back. Edmund was 67 years old. He used a cane. His gray overcoat was damp at the shoulders. His wrists were bound with zip ties, the kind that cut if you struggled. So he didn't struggle. He moved at the pace the cane required, which was the only pace he'd moved at for the past 4 months. Henley said something to Colhoun that Edmund didn't catch. Both men laughed. Edmund counted the ceiling tiles as they walked him down the corridor, not because he was nervous. He had been nervous exactly once in his career. The first time, 38 years ago, his first week with the Canadian Human Rights Commission, when he'd had to testify against a housing board that had discriminated against black families in Nova Scotia for over a decade. He'd been 29 years old, and his hands had shaken on the folder of evidence. The board's lawyer had looked at him the way Henley was looking at him now, like whatever was standing in front of him didn't fully count. He'd learned to use that look. It told you everything about a person. More importantly, it made them careless. Have you ever watched someone mistake silence for weakness? Watched them build their whole case on the assumption that what they could see was everything there was to see? Because in 72 hours, inside a federal tribunal hearing room in Winnipeg, these men were going to understand exactly what they had arrested. But first, let me take you back to where it started. 7 months earlier, the Canadian Human Rights Commission's National Systemic Review Unit occupied the 4th floor of a building on Sparks Street in Ottawa that smelled like old carpet and strong coffee. Edmund Croft had his cane hooked over the arm of his chair and a folder open across his knees. He'd read through it twice on the train from Halifax, where he'd been finishing a housing discrimination case that had taken 14 months. He was supposed to be on leave. He'd booked 2 weeks at his sister Adele's place in Prince Edward Island. He had a flight confirmation in his inbox that he had not yet cancelled. His supervisor, Ingrid Asare, wore reading glasses with bright orange frames and had the patience of someone who had survived 17 years of federal bureaucracy. She slid a second folder across her desk. "Before you say no," she said, "I haven't said anything. You were about to. I can tell by the cane." Edmund looked down. He was gripping the handle. He relaxed his hand. "What is it?" "Hartwell Correctional Services. Private contractor, manages 3 provincial remand facilities in Manitoba. The one we're looking at is Stonebrook, 2 hours north of Winnipeg." Edmund opened the folder. A map of flat gray land. A photograph of a low concrete building. A chart tracking solitary confinement placements over 24 months. "Every person on that chart is either Black or Indigenous," Ingrid said. "Out of 43 placements. 43. Edmund was quiet. Medical requests denied at 3 times the rate of the general population. Grievances filed and lost. A local RCMP detachment whose corporal, Dale Fawcett, has fished with the facility director for 11 years. Who's the director? Stuart Vickers. 52, running Hartwell's contract since 2017. Nothing formal on his record except a pattern of facilities that always fall just below the threshold for review. She paused. The complaint system inside that building routes through Vickers' own office. The province reviews it once a year by mail. Edmund turned a page. A photograph of a woman standing outside the facility in a winter coat. Doris Antwi, 71. Below that, grandson Jamar, Antwi Brathwaite, 24, held in administrative segregation for 61 consecutive days after filing a complaint about being denied his asthma inhaler. Edmund set the folder down. He picked up his cane. He stood. "When do I start?" he said. Ingrid took off her orange glasses. 2 weeks for cover. There's a contract laundry service that does linen runs for facilities in the region. The owner's cooperating. His driver just retired. You're the new hire. Edmund. She stopped him. You're 67. You've got the knee. This isn't a 2-week case. I know what it takes. She looked at him a moment longer. A system designed to investigate itself will always find itself clean. That's exactly right, Edmund said. Call Adele for me. Tell her I'll make it in the spring. The cover name was Edward Crow. Business cards in his wallet, a Manitoba driver's license, a phone that forwarded to a monitored line in Ottawa. The laundry van was white with a green logo on the side, Prairie Fresh Linen Services. Edmund drove it without difficulty. He had grown up in Dartmouth, in a house where the driveway was a long gravel road, and you learned to drive a truck before you learned anything else. He arrived at Stonebrook on a Tuesday morning in April. Colhoun, at the gate, glanced at the van, the manifest, and Edmund's face in roughly that order of attention. He waved him through without speaking. That was how it began, as nothing, as background, as the old man with the laundry. Edmund was methodical. He had done undercover work 4 times in 38 years, and each time the same principle held. The less you tried to look, the more you saw. He came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, traded linen carts in the staff laundry room, drank the coffee they left out if someone offered. He was slow. He made no one nervous. The recording equipment was distributed between the button on his overcoat and the handle of his cane. Both had been transmitting to a secure server in Ottawa since day 1. Within 3 weeks, he had documented 7 incidents. A man in C Block who had been requesting dental care since January. Segregation logs with backdated paperwork that concealed holds beyond the legal limit. Henley, on 3 separate occasions, addressing black inmates with language Edmund recorded in full and transcribed each evening at his rented room in the town of Garnet Lake. Population 1,400. He met Doris Antwi on a Thursday afternoon in June, in the parking lot, standing at a bus stop with no shelter in the rain, because she had just been told her visiting request was denied. No reason given. She had driven 4 hours from Winnipeg. She was 71 years old, and she had taken a day off from the clinic, where she volunteered 3 mornings a week, and she was standing in a parking lot, in the rain, because her grandson was inside, and she could not reach him. Edmund pulled the van over. He didn't say who he was. He said, "Ma'am, can I give you a ride somewhere dry?" They sat in the van for 40 minutes while the rain came down. Doris told him about Jamar, 24 years old, awaiting trial on a charge she didn't believe would stick and couldn't afford to fight. 7 months inside. She had spoken to him on the phone twice. Each call cost more than her phone bill. He filed a complaint in March, she said, about his inhaler. He's had asthma since he was 4 years old. They took it on intake and didn't give it back. When he asked for it, they put him in segregation. Edmund asked if she'd reported this. I reported it to the facility. They wrote back and said the matter had been reviewed and no policy violation was found. She paused. I wrote to the province. I haven't heard back. She looked out the rain-streaked window at the concrete building. I'm going to keep coming. They can deny me every single week, and I'm going to keep coming. Because at least Jamar will know that somebody is out here. Edmund didn't take notes in front of her. The button on his coat was already running. That night, he filed his second report to Ottawa. The complaint routing system funnels all grievances through the facility director's office. By design. Families don't know they can escalate federally. That information is not posted, not accessible. The powerlessness is structural, not accidental. He had 4 months of documentation when it happened. It was a Tuesday in late October. Edmund was swapping cart 3 for cart 4 in the staff laundry room when Henley appeared in the doorway. Hey, old man. Edmund looked up slowly. You've got a camera on you somewhere. I've got a hearing aid. It has an indicator light. Henley walked closer. He was 34, broad-shouldered, with the particular confidence of a man who had been large since high school, and confused size with authority for 15 years. Let me see your coat. I'd prefer. Henley grabbed the lapel. What happened next happened quickly. He found the button. He pulled. Edmund stepped back, and his cane slipped on the linoleum, and he went down on one knee. He caught the cart, didn't fall. But he was 67 years old, and he was on one knee on a laundry room floor, and Henley was standing over him, holding a button that had separated from his coat. Colquhoun appeared in the doorway 30 seconds later. Then Vickers arrived. Stuart Vickers was a man who kept his expression still, the way a man keeps his expression still when he has learned that reactions are leverage. He looked at Edmund on the floor. He looked at the button in Henley's hand. Call Dale, he said. Corporal Dale Fawcett of the Garnet Lake RCMP detachment arrived in 22 minutes. He shook Vickers' hand in the parking lot, and then walked over to where Edmund sat in a plastic chair someone had brought outside. He looked at Edmund the way men like him always looked at men like Edmund, as though everything he needed to know was visible on the surface, and what was visible was not much. Laundry driver, Fawcett said, had a recording device. A button on my coat, with a transmitter inside. Fawcett crouched to Edmund's eye level. Going to charge you with theft of facility property and trespassing under false pretenses. Mr. Vickers says some linens went missing from inventory. Edmund's zip ties were on before the sentence finished. Henley took a photo. He and Colquhoun exchanged a look. Vickers watched Edmund being walked to the cruiser without expression. In the facility director's office that evening, Vickers dictated an incident report that bore no resemblance to what had occurred. Delivery contractor apprehended, following routine inspection. Recording device discovered concealed in clothing. Contractor became combative when confronted. He added a line about missing inventory, 4 sets of fitted sheets, 3 pillowcases. Neither the sheets nor the pillowcases had gone anywhere. But Vickers had been writing reports for 26 years, and he knew that the first version of events was the one people remembered, and that missing was easier to prove than planted. In the holding cell at Garnet Lake Detachment, Edmund Croft sat on a metal bench and organized. He replayed the laundry room frame by frame. The button had separated cleanly. The recording stopped when the connection broke. How much had been captured before that moment was a question for Ottawa. It did not matter. The cane had been transmitting independently for 4 months. Every conversation in that facility, every corridor, every inch of C block, all of it was on the server in Ottawa. The button had been a redundancy. 400 kilometers away, Ingrid Asare watched a notification appear on her terminal. Device housing breach, Unit 1. She picked up her phone and called the duty lawyer. Then she typed to the file contact for the tribunal. Proceed. Facility director involved. RCMP contact compromised. We are moving. The hearing was set for Thursday. Not a criminal court proceeding. A federal tribunal under the Canadian Human Rights Act, convened in a borrowed boardroom on the 7th floor of a federal building in Winnipeg. 2 adjudicators, a court reporter, Ingrid Asare in the gallery, because some things you attended in person. Stuart Vickers arrived with a lawyer from Hartwell's retained firm, a man named Leonard Price. Vickers wore a blazer and a calm expression. Henley and Colquhoun sat behind him. Price opened by presenting the company's position. Routine delivery contractor. Recording device discovered. Theft charges pending. The tribunal has no standing to. The adjudicator, Justice Chantal Bergeron, who had been on the federal bench for 19 years, and whose expression suggested she had eaten more confident arguments than this for breakfast, raised her hand. Miss Asare, she said, you indicated in your preliminary submission that the Commission has a disclosure. Ingrid stood. The Commission does, Justice Bergeron. A disclosure this proceeding must hear before Hartwell's jurisdictional arguments can have any standing. Price began to object. Bergeron looked at him once. He stopped. The man charged with theft and trespassing by Hartwell Correctional Services. Ingrid said, is Senior Investigator Edmund Croft of the Canadian Human Rights Commission's National Systemic Review Unit. He has held that position for 31 years. He was conducting a federally authorized pattern and practice investigation of Stonebrook Remand Centre pursuant to the Canadian Human Rights Act, Section 40. The room changed. Not with noise, with stillness. The particular stillness of people rapidly recalculating everything they understood about the room they were sitting in. Vickers' lawyer wrote something on his legal pad and underlined it twice. Vickers went very still. Henley looked at Colquhoun. Colquhoun looked at the door. Ingrid pressed forward. The commission requests permission to present recorded evidence gathered during the investigation. Granted, said Bergeron. The footage ran for 11 minutes. 4 months of documentation, edited to key incidents, played on a screen positioned so both adjudicators and the gallery could see clearly. The segregation block in C Wing. A man asking a guard for medication and being told to return to his cell. Henley on 3 separate dates, using language that was now transcribed in the commission's evidence binder. Vickers in his office on a Tuesday in August, reading a complaint letter and dropping it into a recycling bin without opening the response envelope. A phone call between Vickers and a provincial official. These numbers don't have to go anywhere if we handle it internally. A laundry room in late October, Henley grabbing a lapel, Edmund's knee on the floor, Henley taking a photo. When the footage ended, Bergeron removed her glasses. "Mr. Henley," she said, "you are on record, in commission footage, using language I will not repeat in this room, on 3 occasions, directed at black inmates in your care. Do you deny this?" Henley's lawyer touched his arm. Henley shook him off. That was taken out of context. The footage is 11 minutes. You are visible for approximately 4 of them. What context requires 11 minutes? Silence. Ingrid did not pause. The reveal was not the case. The reveal was the door. What came through it was everything else. She stood before the adjudicators, with a binder color-coded and tabbed, and organized with the precision of a man who had spent 4 months alone in a rented room in Garnet Lake, transcribing and filing and building the architecture of something solid enough to stand in a federal proceeding. Over 4 months, the commission had documented 43 placements in administrative segregation. Every individual placed was either black or indigenous. The facility held a population roughly 60% white. The segregation rate for black and indigenous inmates was 11 times higher. She documented 17 denied medical requests, including Jamar Antwi Brathwaite's asthma inhaler, confiscated on intake and never returned. She documented the complaint routing system. She presented 16 letters from families, including a letter from Doris Antwi dated March 14th, received by the facility, logged in the intake system, and never answered. Then she called Doris Antwi to the stand. Doris walked in from the hallway with the particular dignity of a woman who has been asking to be heard for 7 months and has decided that today she will be heard, regardless of what anyone in the room does about it. She was 71 years old. She wore a good coat, the kind kept for important occasions. She held her purse with both hands. She sat down. She looked at the adjudicators. She looked at Vickers. Vickers was studying his lawyer's legal pad. "Mrs. Antwi," Ingrid said, "can you tell the tribunal about your grandson Jamar's experience at Stonebrook?" Doris's voice was measured and clear. "My grandson is 24 years old. He has never been convicted of anything. He has been held at Stonebrook for 7 months awaiting trial. He has had asthma since he was a small child. His inhaler was taken from him the day he arrived. When he asked for it back, he was placed in administrative segregation." "How long was he in segregation?" 61 days. She said it the way you say a number when the number is no longer a number but a shape of time you have carried. I was denied 3 visiting requests during that period. I drove to the facility twice anyway. I stood in that parking lot. She paused. I wrote to the facility. They told me the matter had been reviewed. I wrote to the province. I'm still waiting. She steadied herself. I'm a retired nurse, she said. I know what happens to someone with asthma in a place like that without their medication. I know what the inside of Jamar's chest felt like for 61 days. Her voice caught once, then settled. He is my daughter's boy. He grew up in my kitchen, and they held him in a room the size of a closet for 2 months because he asked for his inhaler. A woman in the gallery pressed her hand over her mouth. The second witness was Celestino Duby, 44, released from Stonebrook 8 weeks earlier after his charges were stayed. He described being placed in segregation after filing a complaint about a guard. He was told he could appeal within 5 days. He was not given an appeal form. When he asked for one, he was told none were available. Did you file a complaint about the denial of the appeal form? Ingrid asked. I tried. The complaint goes to the facility director. He looked at Vickers, the same man who approved the segregation. Then Ingrid turned to Vickers. Vickers had spent the last 40 minutes with his hands flat on the table in front of him. His lawyer had written several things on the legal pad. Vickers had read none of them. Mr. Vickers, Ingrid said, the complaint routing system at Stonebrook funnels all inmate grievances to your personal office. Did you design that system? The facility operates under provincial guidelines. Mr. Vickers, did you design the system? I approved the operational framework. The letter from Doris Antwi dated March 14th. It appears in your intake log. There is no response on file. Was this letter reviewed? Our process involves a review period. The review period under provincial guidelines is 30 days. This letter is 7 months old. Ingrid opened the binder to a tabbed page. There are 16 lists in this category. Received, logged, unanswered. Some date back to 2022. In the gallery, a reporter from a Winnipeg paper, who had received a tip 2 days ago, and driven 4 hours to attend a federal hearing, stopped writing and stared at the page count. Vickers said nothing. Bergeron leaned forward. She looked at Vickers with the expression of someone who has been patient for a very long time and has decided that patience is no longer the right tool. Mr. Vickers, in the footage played today, you are recorded receiving a letter, logging it, and placing it in a recycling receptacle. The letter was not opened. Can you explain what we observed? Vickers clasped his hands. I would like to consult. You will have the opportunity. I am asking whether you have anything to say now. The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room so completely you can hear the court reporter's fingers pause above the keys. Finally, I want to speak with my lawyer. Bergeron turned to Edmund. Edmund had been sitting at the commission's table throughout, cane hooked over the arm of his chair, hands folded in front of him. He had not spoken since Ingrid had disclosed his identity. He had listened to every piece of evidence as though hearing it for the first time, which in a sense he was, hearing it not as a man who had recorded it alone in a rented room, but as evidence entered into a public record in front of a federal adjudicator. Bergeron said, Senior Investigator Croft, do you wish to make a statement? Edmund unfolded his hands. He looked at the adjudicators. Jamar Antwi Brathwaite is still in that facility, he said. I would ask that his case be the first matter the Commission's order addresses. Bergeron wrote this down. The Commission's application was granted in full. An immediate interim order. Suspensions of all segregation placements at Stonebrook pending a full compliance review. Jamar Antwi Brathwaite to be transferred to an independent health facility that afternoon. All complaint letters received by the facility over the prior 24 months to be preserved and turned over to the Commission. The full order, issued 14 days later, required independent oversight of all segregation decisions, external routing of inmate complaints, mandatory recording equipment in all housing units, immediate reinstatement of confiscated medical devices, and a Commission compliance monitor embedded at the facility for 18 months. Hartwell Correctional Services provincial contract was referred to the Attorney General's office for review. The referral recommended non-renewal. Henley and Colquhoun were suspended pending a separate investigation. Stuart Vickers resigned 3 weeks after the hearing. He issued no public statement. His name was removed from the facility's masthead the same afternoon. Corporal Dale Fawcett was transferred, at his request, to a detachment in another region. The RCMP's Professional Standards Division opened a file. The theft and trespassing charges against Edward Crow were withdrawn the day the tribunal decision was issued. The fitted sheets and pillowcases that had been listed as missing in Vickers' incident report were found to have never been missing, which Vickers by then was not in a position to explain. 6 weeks after the hearing, Edmund drove back to Garnet Lake, not for work. He'd left a pair of gloves in the rented room on Kelsey Avenue, and Marguerite, who owned the house, had called to say she'd found them. He had told her he'd be back in the spring. The spring had come. He drove back also because Doris Antwi had called. Jamar had been released on a supervision order, the trial rescheduled. A different Crown attorney had reviewed the file and described the original charge, in writing, as inadequately supported. Doris had used those words 3 times in the phone call. Inadequately supported. She said them the way you say words that have been a long time coming and still cost something to say. I wanted you to know, she said. I wanted someone to know who was there for all of it. They met at a diner in Garnet Lake on a Wednesday afternoon. Doris brought Jamar. He was 24 years old, and he walked with a particular caution of someone who has spent time in a space with no horizon, and is still remembering that horizons exist. He shook Edmund's hand. Thank you, he said. Edmund looked at him, at the 24-year-old face with the 30-year-old eyes, and said, You filed the complaint. You asked for what you needed, and you wrote it down. That's where it started. That's what made it real. They ate lunch. They talked about small things, the weather, Jamar's plan to finish his electrical certification, the new oversight board whose first public meeting was the following month. Edmund told them about PEI, about Adele, about the drive he still owed himself. After lunch, he walked to his car. He passed the entrance to Stonebrook on the highway north of town. A truck from a different linen service was idling at the gate. The facility looked the same from the outside. Concrete, flat, gray. A new decal had been added to the entrance camera housing. Compliance monitored, CHRC 2024. Edmund drove past without stopping. He pressed the window button and let the spring air come in. He was 67 years old, and his knee ached in the cold. And he was due for leave that he would actually take this time. And he drove south with the quiet knowledge that the building behind him would never be the same, even if it looked identical from the road. Some things change from the inside. They always look the same from the road. I think about what Edmund chose to do in that laundry room. He was on one knee on a linoleum floor with zip ties on his wrists before the day was done, and somewhere in his coat was a button that had just broken, and he knew that 4 words would have ended it. I'm a federal investigator. 4 words, and he'd have been standing upright in under a minute. He didn't say them. Not because he couldn't. Because 61 days in administrative segregation is not a problem that 4 words solve. Because Doris Antwi had driven 4 hours to stand in a parking lot in the rain, and no one had asked her name. Because there were 16 letters in a binder, and every one of them had been dropped into a recycling bin, calmly, in the middle of the workday, like it cost nothing. The truth doesn't always need to win immediately. It needs to survive long enough to reach the right room. And I keep coming back to Doris. Not the tribunal order, not Vickers clearing out his office. Doris, standing in that parking lot in October, in the rain, with nowhere to go and no one listening, choosing to come back the next week anyway. Same story, same words, every single time. The truth didn't change. She just kept carrying it until someone opened a door. If this story sat with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, because the next one matters just as much.